the Jazz Notes podcast. I'm Ben Anderson.
I'm Chandler Holt.
We are recording this on November 25th. It is a Monday. As always, find us on Twitter at Ben's Hoops, at Holt Sports. Read us at KSLSports.com. I send out a prompt every Monday at about 11 o'clock asking for your mailbag questions. It's how we end every episode. In fact, it usually makes up the majority of the time we spend on the episode is answering your Jazz questions. So make sure you respond there. We like to answer them, and it makes our job easier. But most importantly, I think it makes the podcast better. And honestly, thanks for everyone who's listening. I think the podcast has been very successful. Chandler, you've been doing this for well over a year now, right? It goes fast. I like podcasting a lot, so I'm glad everyone has been interactive, and the response we get continues to be excellent. And I think people like listening to Jazz talk about Jazz basketball, even if the team's not playing fabulously well. So it's a pleasure for us to be able to do it.
Speaking of not playing fabulously well, last week for the Jazz, a 1-2 week, started with a loss to the Lakers, 124-118. Markkanen led the squad with 25 points in that one. Jazz shot 50% from the field, but Lakers shoot 55 and 45. So it was an even turnovers in that game. Jazz won the rebound battle, but Lakers just shot the net off the rim, basically.
Yep.
Then the Jazz lost to San Antonio, 126-118. Once again, Markkanen with 25-plus in that game. And then ended the week with a win over New York, 121-106. Markkanen, I believe, season high 34 points in that one.
I think he had 35 in the season opener.
You're right.
But he hadn't bounced back. You know, he did that last year, too. He had a huge game early on and then really didn't get close to it. So I think a good sign that he is bouncing back and playing as well as he is, unless you're trying to tank, which that hurts. The Jazz offense is just so much better than it was early in the season. In their first 6 games, the Jazz failed to score 100 points 3 of their 6 times. They've broken 100 every game since then, which is standard in the NBA. You should really never be below 100. And since November 9th, let me pull up exactly how many games this is. It's got to be 8 games now or so. They've been below 110 only once. So the offense is just playing a lot better. Now, they are still only, I think, 3-6 in that stretch, so it was 9 games. It's not like they're winning a lot of games, but the offense is playing better, and at least that makes the games watchable.
Yes.
They were pretty unwatchable to start the year. They are less unwatchable than they were. There's some concept of what's happening. I still don't think they're going to win a lot of games, and to this point, and we saw it really on Saturday in the win over the Knicks, the Jazz win games when they themselves shoot the net off the rim, as you said. You shoot 56% from the three-point line, you're going to win every game. Nobody does that, and the Jazz aren't going to do that probably again this year. But in the Jazz's 3 wins this season, they have shot 44% from 3 when they beat Chicago, 30% against San Antonio, which was the one anomaly game that they've actually probably played well. Their win against Dallas at home, they won by 2. They shot 38% from 3. And then, they hit 19 threes on 34 attempts, 56% from the three-point line. Very, very impressive shooting night.
Something that I thought that was interesting from the New York game, they had double New York's turnovers, but like you said, when you shoot that well, there's not really much you can do. And even though they had that many turnovers, they won by double digits. So.
And the Jazz are only 2-2 in games when they shoot above 40% from 3. That's bad. You should be basically unbeatable when you shoot above 40% as a team on threes, and that has not been the case. So they're going to lose plenty of games this year still. I'm sure there are some Jazz fans thinking ugh, it's too many wins. You can't be beating playoff teams like the Knicks. It's well, you're going to lose other games because you're not going to show up. Speaking of which, what do they got coming up this week?
In the next week, 4-game homestand for the Jazz, starting against San Antonio. A lot of games against the Spurs early so far this season.
Yeah, this is the last game, right?
I think so.
This will be their 4th. I think it's their 4th already.
That game's on Tuesday, and then they're going to host the Denver Nuggets on Wednesday, back-to-back, and then hosting Dallas on Saturday, another back-to-back on Sunday as they host the Lakers.
You would like it more if they didn't have 2 back-to-backs.
Yes.
That makes it difficult because, again, I would say 1-3 is probably reasonable. You probably beat San Antonio. In all honesty, I think you probably beat the Spurs because you did just lose to them. I think you beat San Antonio. I think you lose to Denver on the second night of a back-to-back. Turkey Day, you have at least a rest Friday, and you come back on Saturday. You play Dallas. I don't think Dallas is going to lose to the Jazz twice.
No.
In Salt Lake. And then I think you lose to the Lakers on the second night of a back-to-back. Though, odds of LeBron playing in Salt Lake City are 0 because he never plays in Salt Lake, so you're not going to see him, I would guess.
Yeah.
2-2 is on the table. Realistically, probably 1-3.
I would say 1-3 as well. I think that the only one that really looks like a win on the schedule is against the Spurs. And like we've talked about in the past, there's really no team, maybe except for the Wizards who have yet to win in November. But there's no team in the NBA that you'll look at and be like, oh, that's a scheduled win for the Jazz.
Right.
But considering you just played San Antonio at home and you've already played them multiple times this season, I feel like you can pick up that win on Tuesday.
Yeah, and we'll see who's playing. We'll see who's healthy and who's available to go. I don't think anybody was really banged up after the win against New York, and you got a couple days off for rest. But you can always find injuries. Jordan Clarkson can always have plantar fasciitis, or somebody can get dinged up, and it seems to happen. So we'll see what happens this week.
Before we get into the break and the mailbag in the second half, I have a little segment for you.
Okay.
I'm going to give you some Jazz player stats so far through 14 games this season?
18?
18? Oh,
What are they at? Because they are 4-12. So 16 games.
Yeah, 16.
We'll split the difference. Yeah.
I'm going to give you some Jazz player stats, and then you just tell me higher or lower based on the rest of the season. So where they will end the season at.
Okay.
And then you can give me your opinion on how they've looked so far and why you think it'll be higher or lower.
Great.
Starting with an easy one. Markkanen, he's currently at 19.9 points per game.
Up.
Exactly. The last two seasons,
easy.
25-6, 23-2. Even in the last week, he's averaged 28 points a game.
Yeah, he was shooting 36% on field goals overall, and now he's back. Lowry's back. Whatever happened, whatever it was, he's fine. The Jazz are finding a way to get him the ball, and he's playing better.
All right, next one, a little bit tougher. Keontae currently has 5.7 assists per game. In his rookie year, he was at 4.4.
I think it stays up.
Okay.
I think he's trying to make, and he was not great against, he had a great first half against the Knicks and an atrocious second half. It was crazy how bad his second half was. But I think he's making a real effort to get guys involved. And I think he realizes, like, hey, if everything hinges on whether or not my shot goes in, I could be out of the league because you can't, unless you're an elite shooter, you don't really control that well. And to this point, he's not an elite shooter. So being a good playmaker would really help extend his career. So I bet he stays right there, 5'7", 5'8".
Okay.
That's a high number. It's a good number, but that's good for the Jazz. You want that number to be high.
We're sticking with Keontae. Speaking of his shooting, last year he was at 39.1% from the floor, 33.4% from three. Will his shooting splits this year go up or down? He's at 36.3 and 32.3.
I think he ends up at 40 and 35.
Okay.
Which is up.
Yes.
Up. I mean, he needs to get up from the floor. Again, he was so bad through his first 6 or whatever it was games this season. I mean, historically bad. He was tied with the worst shooting start by any player ever, who was averaging, I think, 15 attempts a game. That is really going to set him back. He's been quite a bit better since then. I know the Knicks game wasn't great. He was good in the first half, bad in the second. He has more okay games than he has terrible games.
Okay.
So I'll go up. I'll go above on Keontae.
Next, Walker Kessler. He's currently at 2.8 blocks a game.
It's high.
Yes. Second in the NBA. His previous seasons are 2.3 and 2.4.
I'll say yeah. I think he does.
Okay.
The Jazz played him 36 minutes the other night, which was kind of surprising. The season high coming back off of missing 6 games with a hip injury, and they just kept going to him and going to him and going to him. So I think he does. Walker is really good.
Yes.
Again, there was this funny thing last year where we opened the season and we were talking about who is the Jazz's second best player again. This is last year, and we're coming off of Walker's rookie season. We thought it's either Walker or Jordan Clarkson. And then what happened last year, and it was a bit of a disaster, it was just like, ugh, well, that was a terrible take. And it's like, no, actually it wasn't. That's how bad his second year was. Because after his first season, it felt legitimately like he might be the Jazz's second best player. And by the way, he might.
Yeah.
He still might be the Jazz's second best player. Like, I know Lowry had a 34-point outing against New York. I think Walker might have been the best player. He really absolutely destroyed the Knicks' interior offense, their interior defense, because they had to pay a lot of attention to him on lobs. He just played really well. He's a much better screener than he used to be. He does a lot of things that help you win games.
Next, last one. We're moving to a rookie, so no previous seasons to look at for this number. But Kyle Filipowski, 7.3 points a game.
Up. I think he'll come back, and I think his shooting numbers have dipped after a really hot start early, which is the reason he was not in the lineup originally. But I don't think the Jazz want to start John Collins, Lowry Markkanen, and Walker Kessler all season long together because your second unit's going to be really bad. So I think they're going to move John back to the bench whenever Kyle comes back, and just by starting, he's going to get lots of opportunities.
Do you think he can get up to double-digit scoring this year, or maybe just a little bit under that?
Yeah, he can probably get up around 9.
Okay.
9, 5, and 3, which is a really good rookie year. For a second-round pick, if you're starting, that's really good.
All right, you want to take a break?
Let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll get your mailbag questions. Stick around. More Jazz Notes coming up next. Welcome back to the Jazz Notes podcast. Ben Anderson, Chandler Holt. All right, before we get to the mailbag, not a ton of questions. It's Thanksgiving week. People are traveling. I totally get it. Let's look at the NBA standings right now and where the Jazz are. Again, they do have a victory. They picked up one more win last week, beating the New York Knicks. So they climbed to 4-12 on the season. And as a result, they now have the 5th worst record in the NBA as opposed to, I think they were 3rd. Maybe they were even down to 2nd at one point.
Yeah.
I think the 76ers got a random win last week and were tied with the Jazz, I think, for the 2nd worst record, ahead of only the Wizards. And now the Jazz, with 4 wins, have doubled up the Wizards' win record.
So, yeah, like you said, Jazz are 4-12. That's 14th in the West. They're only 0.5 games ahead of the Pelicans, who are now 15th. 26 overall. Again, only 1.5 games away from the Wizards. But some teams, all of the teams that are under the Jazz now, the Toronto Raptors at 4-13. The Pelicans also at 4-13. Philadelphia at 3-13, awful season for them, and then the Wizards 2-13.
Last week we talked about these teams that we just assume are going to get better and start winning more games. The Raptors were one of the ones we threw out there. We said Scotty Barnes is going to come back and they're going to start winning. He came back and they beat Minnesota.
Yep.
And Minnesota's only 8-8, which is actually good for the Jazz also because the Jazz own their 1st round pick. But that was a sign that maybe we were right. Pelicans, bad news. Doesn't sound like Zion's getting any closer to playing. And may just not play at all.
Yeah.
I think there's a real chance they could just say he's not going to play this year. Hamstring injuries are tricky. He's got a very unique body. Would I bet he plays this year? Probably. But is there a chance they would just say, no, we like being the worst team in the NBA and having a chance to get another number 1 overall pick to maybe replace Zion or team with him? I could see them doing that. Philadelphia, I would assume, is going to get better at some point, but Joel did not play yesterday. I don't think he's playing tonight. Or they've got like 2 games he's not going to play in. Tyrese Maxey continues to kind of be in and out of the lineup. Paul George got hurt again.
Yep.
It's like this is just a disastrous season. I still think they finished with a better record than the Jazz, but at some point the rubber has to meet the road, and it just hasn't. And now the vibes are terrible. Like, this is a disastrous situation in Philly.
The whole situation with like information coming out of their players-only meeting is crazy.
Yeah, it's ugly. Joel's a problem. Joel he's just a circus, and the problem is Daryl Morey, their GM, is also a bit of a circus. I don't think he minds the drama. Like, he doesn't keep a tight lid on things. Clearly, there was drama with James Harden in Houston when he was the GM there. It just seems to follow him. And I think at some point you have to blame him for that. He is great at acquiring talent and getting it on his team and manufacturing maneuverability for roster movement that didn't seem like it was possible. But there is always, always, always drama. And at some point, if there's always drama, it's probably the guy who's the common factor there, and it always seems to be Daryl Morey. So Joel's dramatic, Daryl's dramatic. It's a problem, and Paul George never stays healthy. He hasn't been healthy with the Clippers. I don't think he's going to be healthy here. I still think they finished with a better record than the Jazz because despite all those disastrous injuries, they're 1 game back of the Jazz.
Let's talk about the best of the worst.
Okay.
The Wizards.
Yeah.
There's a lot of teams that like NBA fans can point out and be like, yeah, they're probably trying to tank. They're probably trying to lose games. I don't think you can say that about the Wizards. They're just bad.
They're awful.
Like we're talking like 2016 76ers levels of bad.
Yeah. They're going fully invested on their young players. Yeah, Kuzma and Jordan Poole still play, but those two are pretty unserious basketball players because there's nobody holding them accountable. But it's about developing Alex Sarr. It's about developing Bilal Coulibaly, and they're leaning into it, which is the right move. But, yeah, when they traded Deni Avdija to Portland, it made Portland a lot better. It made the Wizards a lot worse, and they just weren't going to win games.
I think Washington is the only team that I don't think the Jazz can lose more games than.
I agree. The Jazz are not going to be able to catch them, but Brooklyn just keeps winning games.
Yeah.
Jordi Fernandez is a good coach and wants to win, and I don't think they own their own draft pick. I could be wrong on that, but so there's not really a reason to lose. Detroit is pretty good. Portland's okay. Yeah. Now Portland's probably going to trade Robert Williams, but again, these teams are just as good or maybe a little bit better than the Jazz, and because of the Jazz's really slow start, there honestly might be teams that win 25 games and the Jazz win 23 just because the Jazz started 0-7 and they accidentally beat Minnesota in back-to-back games, speaking of Portland. Those types of things really add up.
Yep. All right, you want to get into the mailbag now?
Yeah, and I will say, I'm always a little hesitant to say this because there are reasons why you play certain lineups. There are. The Jazz played lineups against the Spurs that didn't make me think the goal was to win that game.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just about we want to see how much we can develop these players. It felt like playing lineups in very experimental fashion that I would be curious had ever played together, even in practice.
Yeah.
In a game that was very winnable. They were in a spot to beat San Antonio. I think they were up 16 at the half, right?
Yep.
And lost that game. So Jazz are making sure that they're not winning too many games on purpose as well, I think. And I think that was the most glaring example of it I had seen. Anyway, I could be wrong. I totally accept that I could be wrong there. All right, yeah, let's get to the mailbag. Not a lot, but again, people are traveling, family time. I get it.
All right, first one, a DM question from Cody Ryan. Are there any further details on what the arena will look like with its renovations?
Again, I have not seen mock-ups or anything. I have been told by somebody who would know close to the top that the wall that you see with the Clippers is kind of the perceived idea for the Jazz. Like the wall, which is behind their, I think it's only one of their baskets, right? It's not both of them.
Yep.
It's just one of their baskets where it's extraordinarily steep. I talked to some of the other writers. I wasn't obviously there when the Jazz played the Clippers, but they said it's like crazy steep, how much they're on top of you with that wall. The Jazz basically have to do that, or the Delta Center people basically have to do that if you are going to be able to see the goal in hockey. And then also be able to have a basketball court out there. So I think it's going to be two walls. I think you're going to have both sides, fans right on top of you behind the backboard on both ends. And yes, they're going to do one next summer and then one the summer after that. Maybe it's not even this summer. Maybe it's 2 summers. Whatever it is, whenever they start. Yeah, they're going to blow out that wall. It must be next summer. They're going to blow out that wall. And that will just be closed off, I think, for a year. And then they'll fix that one and they'll blow out the next one. Okay. And that'll be gone for a year. If I'm correct on that. I could be wrong, but I think that's kind of the plan of it. But yes, 2 walls, really steep to make sure, and then we'll see what else they do. I know, again, you saw Ryan Smith was at the Clippers game. He is there checking out the Intuit Dome and seeing what do they do, what works, what doesn't work, what should we like, what should we steal, all those things, and that's absolutely why they were there.
All right, moving on to the X reply questions. First from the Great Bambus. Right now, do you see Juzang or Bryce as a more likely part of the future of the Jazz?
There were some weird comments about what Will Hardy said about Johnny Juzang that caught my attention. I'm going to pull them up for you really quick after the Jazz beat the Knicks because Johnny Juzang came off the bench, played 16 minutes, had 17 points, was or whatever it was 4 of 12 or 4 of 8 from the 3-point line. I kind of interpreted them as telling Bryce Sensabaugh, if you want to make the NBA, you have to play differently. Mm-hmm. And it was funny because coming off of Bryce's best game of the season in San Antonio, he gave the Jazz a real spark in the second quarter, and then he didn't play at all against the Knicks. And yes, Jordan Clarkson came back, and that's why. But Will Hardy said he's talking about Johnny Juzang. He recognized what he needed to do to stay in the league and make a name for himself and earn a full-time contract. Essentially what he said was Johnny Juzang was a ball-in-hand scorer in college at UCLA who liked to dribble, get to the mid-range, shoot difficult mid-range jump shots, and said, that doesn't work at all in the NBA. I can't be that. I better change who I am to become an NBA player. And now he is basically a zero-dribble three-point shooter. He just runs, he gets open, and he shoots when he touches the ball. The Jazz need that probably from Bryce Sensabaugh. Yeah. Bryce still defaults to dribble. Even it's like dribble to set up your three-point shot. He doesn't even do catch and shoot. He catches, dribbles, sidesteps, whatever, and then shoots. And it's just like, you don't have time to do that in the NBA. So while I really felt like Will Hardy was complimenting Johnny Juzang, I thought some of that was like a message to like, hey, look, Bryce, we've talked to you about what you need to do. Johnny's doing it, and he's on the court as a result. What are you going to do? Are you going to fix that? Again, that may be totally my own reading of it, but I had that feeling, so I think this is a really good question. But probably Johnny Juzang. I mean, Johnny Juzang has a great NBA skill. The 2 skills you need to have right now in the NBA are be really big or be a great shooter. Ideally, you're both. But Johnny Juzang has good size at 6'6", 6'7", and is really a great three-point shooter. In fact, one of our over-unders should be what's his three-point shooting number going to be this year? Is it going to climb? I think he's right around 39. He was over 40 last year, but he played so sparingly. Can he be over a 39% three-point shooter? Probably. He gets them off. He gets to the right spots. He's not afraid to shoot them. He shoots really confidently. I do believe in Johnny Juzang as an NBA player. I think that 4-year, $11 million deal the Jazz signed him to was really savvy. And only 1 year is guaranteed.
Interesting thing about Johnny Juzang. Last year, he played 20 games the entire season. He's already at 12 games played this year. Mind you, he was playing near the end of the year last year, so maybe his stats, you can look at him with a little asterisk next to him, but he's shooting 39 exactly from the three-point line right now, and him and Bryce Sensabaugh, ESPN have them listed at the same height. I feel like Juzang's a little bit taller.
Johnny's bigger.
Yes, yeah. But Bryce is listed as 30 pounds heavier, so I feel like Juzang also just has a better NBA body.
not to sound creepy, but yes, I was in the locker room on Saturday after the game, and I noticed, I was like, man, Johnny has a great NBA body. Like, he has really filled out in his third year now. Like, he has put the work in on his body to become an NBA player because he looked like a college kid when he joined the Jazz on the two-way. He just did. He's just like lanky and like thin-chested. It's like, no, that's a grown man now who really shoots the ball well and has NBA height, NBA size. So I think Johnny Juzang's an NBA player. I definitely do. And I think to Will Hardy's credit, more than me reading into it being a shot at Bryce, and not a shot, but a message to Bryce, was just that Johnny has really put in a lot of hard work to become a good NBA player, and that's what the Jazz need.
One more interesting thing about Sensabaugh stats. 10 games played this year. He's shooting over 41% from three. I don't expect that to stick. But like you said, if he gets some better looks with his shots, I could see him being an actual season-long 41% three-point shooter. But with the shots that he takes, I just don't think that's sustainable.
I think he can really shoot. Yeah, I really do. And I know Danny Ainge last year at the end of the season said Bryce Sensabaugh is a better shooter than he showed. Again, you look at these numbers, 46% from the floor, 41% from three, 89% from the free throw line. And he shot great at Ohio State too. Like, he's a great shooter. There is clearly something that the Jazz are trying to get him to do more of that he is not doing and paying off when he gets on the court, where even when he plays well in San Antonio, it's not like, oh, well, obviously we got to put you in the lineup. Like, he is disrupting something or not quite hitting the spots he needs to, and they just want him to focus a little bit harder, and as a result, there's just a little bit of tough love there. Again, he's 20 years old. He was a 28th overall draft pick. Like, the investment the Jazz have made in him is relatively low, and then you control him for the next 2 years still. So, like, you don't actually need to rush this because, Johnny Juzang didn't start to play and may not play tomorrow. Like, I don't know if he's going to play tomorrow. But Johnny Juzang is in year 3. He spent the last 2 years basically in the G League, and now he's a good player. Like, I do think sometimes we rush the idea that, like, the development has to be so quick. It's like, Bryce probably just going to take a bit. He might just take a little while, and maybe by year 3 or 4, he's good. And he doesn't cost you anything. He's $2 million a year. So fine. I get it. You want to be invested in the young guys, but there's no reason to rush Bryce Sensabaugh. And to the same point, I would say Cody Williams doesn't need to be rushed there either.
Yeah.
I don't think it's ever time to panic on these guys. It gets easy to do when you look at Jared McCain playing awesome for the Philadelphia 76ers and think, oh, you should have drafted him. It's like some guys just take a little while. Not everyone develops at the same pace.
All right. One more question from Jazz Time Jones. How do you feel the defense has performed this year? It seems like it has improved.
It is a little bit better. Walker's way better than he was last year.
Yep.
I think John Collins is not as bad as he was last season. I think he has a little bit better understanding of what they're doing. And the perimeter defenders are, I guess, a little bit better, even though you've lost a Chris Dunn type. But I think with Walker, and I know he's missing the last 6 games, and actually the defense totally cratered while he was gone. When Walker's out there, the Jazz are an okay-ish defense. I mean, still bottom 10, but like okay-ish, not worse than the NBA like they were last year.
Currently, the Jazz have the 26th defensive rating in the NBA. However, they're ahead of the Lakers, who have Anthony Davis. Mind you, it's basically Anthony Davis and a bunch of negative defenders for the most part.
Right.
But I'd say the thing that really hurts the Jazz is they are by far the worst in the league in terms of opponent points off of turnovers.
Yeah, the Jazz give the ball away too much.
They're 30th at 23.3. Next is the Raptors at 21.
Yeah, if you were to cut down your turnovers, you wouldn't give up easy baskets going the other direction. If you don't give up easy baskets going the other direction, you're not going to have a bad defensive rating.
Yeah, exactly.
It's that simple. And one of the things the Jazz have done actually as well, and they're not great at it still, but they're better than I think they were last year, is they generate more steals than they did. They're 25th in the NBA, which again is not good. But at least when you get live ball turnovers, you have an opportunity to score yourself. So I think some of those things have made the defense look a little bit better as well. But they're also a good rebounding team.
Really? Yeah, actually.
That's a big part of it as well. I could pull up a rebounding percentage that matters more than just raw rebounds per game. But you look over their last few games, like the Jazz are killing teams on the glass, which you end a defensive possession, you're in a good spot. The Jazz right now have the 4th best rebounds per game number. Again, that doesn't really matter. Let me pull up rebounding percentage. The Jazz rank 9th. That's why.
Yes.
That's what you're seeing. And some of that's on the offensive side of the ball, but their defensive rebounding is, it's 16th. That's fine.
Yeah.
Being the 16th best rebounding team, defensive rebounding team is fine. You end possessions and it makes you look better. They're 9th offensively in offensive rebound percentage. So that's probably more of what you're seeing as opposed to like Keontae's locking him up, because that's not happening.
No.
It's not. No one's really locking anybody up. But Walker makes the paint hard to score in, and then Walker's rebounding numbers being better have helped.
Who would you say is currently the Jazz's second best defender?
Because Walker's number one.
Yes.
Like Drew Eubanks.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just because, again, centers are going to be weighted disproportionately.
Yes.
You're at the rim, and he's an okay shot blocker, so there's value there. Like, there's value to Isaiah Collier getting 3 steals every time he steps on the floor. I don't know why he's so good at getting steals. He didn't necessarily do that when he was at USC, but he gets a lot of steals. So those types of things actually really matter, and steals by themselves don't make you a good defensive player, but they have such a huge impact, like we just said, because they lead to baskets going the other direction, or he blows up fast breaks because he cuts off an outlet pass. Now, the problem is he's usually had a turnover on the other end, so he turns the ball over and then gets it back.
Yes.
Giveth and taketh away, but it's never like, it's not bad. You'll take steals. He averages 1 a game right now, but when he's played a lot, he seems to get 2, 3 when he's out there.
Going back to our award projections that we did before the season started, I had Taylor Hendricks and you had Cody Williams for Defensive Player of the Year. Unfortunate for my projection there, but
Well, and Cody's just too thin.
yeah,
Cody actually is in the right spot, and I like the way he moves. He just gets washed because he just gets pushed out of the way. He's
Yes.
just so skinny.
do you think it could be valuable for the Jazz to maybe put him on guards and increase his foot speed, get a little bit more defensive IQ, and then when he gets
I think they should put him on guards in the G League.
Okay,
I think they should move he and Bryce to the G League.
Yeah.
That's what I would absolutely do. I get it. Like, that means you're playing either Johnny Juzang a lot or even Svi Mikhailuk, and you might win games accidentally if you do that. But, I actually think if you played Taylor last year in the G League, there's absolutely no reason not to play Cody. And by the way, it worked.
yeah.
Taylor was good to start this year. I know he didn't shoot particularly well. I'm not worried about his shot, but I thought he was his body was way better. He moved way better. He seemed to know what was being asked of him because he got all these opportunities and make all these mistakes, but it didn't matter. I think it's hard to make mistakes on the big stage for Cody. And I'm not saying just for Cody. I'm saying by everybody. It's really hard to make mistakes on the big stage or have 0-point games. Go and shoot 20 times in the G League and score 12 points, and nobody cares, and nobody looks at the box score. And then by year 2, at least you know what's being asked of you, and okay, these 8 shots don't work for me, but these 3 do, and I can find those even on the NBA court. So I'm a little surprised he hasn't already been in the G League. I would put him there, but I'm not the coach. Whatever.
Yeah.
What I say doesn't matter. But that's what I would do. I'd let Bryce and Cody go play a bunch of minutes in the G League, because not playing like Bryce is, and Cody playing as poorly or as ineffectively, I should say, as he has been, I'm not sure is helping him either, but I could be wrong.
All right, next week for the Jazz, 4-game homestand, currently set at 4-12. We will be back with you. I believe we're recording on Tuesday next week.
We will be recording on Tuesday. We generally, that's when we do the mailbag story comes out, and we send out our newsletter. If you're not subscribed to that, make sure you subscribe. We like to get it done before then. Scheduling conflicts, we have to record on Tuesday next week, so the podcast won't be out a day early. I will probably still ask for your questions, though, Monday. Okay. That way we'll get a chance to build them out a little bit. So appreciate everyone listening. Find us on Twitter at Ben's Hoops. Find Chandler at C Holt Sports. By the way, I had someone DM me and say, why aren't you on Blue Sky yet? So
okay, I
am on Blue Sky. Also, Ben's Hoops, if that's where you're going. So somebody did ask why Chandler wasn't there, and I said, political differences. No, I don't know. I don't have any idea what it was. You can find me there, and maybe Chandler if he decides to jump over there. But you can always find us on Twitter and reach our DMs. Read us at KSLSports.com. We'll be back with you again next week.